Hi everyone, this is the online lecture for foreign exchange. Okay, what we're going to do today, we're going to define what is exchange rate. Some of you who travel quite a fair bit will be very comfortable with it. Okay, now we'll look at exchange rate systems. All right, you know that currencies have value against one another. Uh, how does that come about? Okay, we're going to take a look at that. So we're going to look at how currencies go up and down. We call it appreciation or depreciation of currency. How the value changes versus another currency, yeah? And we'll look at what's the impact, all right, of that. Okay? Now, in our definition, exchange rate is the price of one currency measured in terms of another country's currency. Exchange rate, there's always an exchange. So there's always two currency that we are comparing. All right. So if someone were to ask you what is Sing dollar worth, it is impossible to answer that question without having another currency as a comparison, right? So we can say if we compare to the ringgit, Singapore dollar is worth this much. If we compare against the US dollar, Singapore dollar is worth this much, right? So it's only possible for us to talk about exchange rate when there's two currencies, so that we can compare one currency in terms of another. Okay. Now, so how much is the Singapore dollar worth in terms of other currencies? I'm using 2019 rates at the end of the year. So at the end of 2019, towards that time, one Sing dollar can fetch you 0.74 US dollar, okay, or it can fetch you 0.66 euro, okay, you get 66 euro cents, or you can get 80.1 Japanese yen, or you can get 22.24 baht. Okay. Now, if you realize the numbers, can you see that the yen rate and the baht, the numbers are larger. Now that's because in these countries they don't use cents. The smallest denomination, okay, that they use is either 1 yen or 1 baht. There's no cents. All right. So countries which doesn't use cents, the denomination tends to get a bit larger. Okay, so in US they use cents, so you see the number get a bit smaller. Okay, so that's one thing that some people don't understand. And how come we have a decimal point here if these countries don't use cents? Now that's strictly for trading purposes, right? When there's trading, they quote the rate. There's a decimal place, but it doesn't mean that using the currency they have cents. Okay, they don't. Okay. Okay, now, so we talk about foreign exchange rate. So we have this Sing to US dollar rate. So one Sing is worth 0.74 US dollar. Now, we usually quote foreign exchange rate by keeping one side as one. Then it's easier to understand. Okay, it's very hard to understand when you quote like zero point 0.2 to 0.8. It's very hard to for the people using this foreign exchange to conceptualize, right? So usually one side is being kept as one. Now, which side is it? Now, for example, what you're seeing now is Sing dollar being kept as one. Alternatively, we can also say one US dollar, all right, is equivalent to 1.35 Sing dollar. All right, now these two are equivalent. All right, then which one do we use? See, they're equivalent, so we can use either one. So sometimes when you go to money changer, they quote you sometimes keeping Sing dollar as one, sometimes they quote you keeping the foreign currency as one. Of course, to us in Singapore, any other currencies are foreign, right? So sometimes they keep foreign as one, sometimes they keep Singapore dollar as one. So there is no strict rule about this. Okay, so sometimes I think it's just customary. I think many people when they go and change currency in US dollar, I think they are more comfortable with looking at the second way that we quote. But it doesn't have any impact on what we are saying because these rates are equivalent, and one side has to be kept as one. Okay. Now, when we quote foreign exchange, sometimes the numerical number, the difference is very slight. One Sing to 0.74 US dollar. Okay, this comparison is meant to alert you that when companies pay in foreign currency, okay, or when we have trade, small differences in exchange rate can balloon to big differences, as you can see here. Okay, so small changes in rate, because when we quote rates, it's usually in the denomination of like one side is kept as one. So sometimes we're talking about maybe the difference is like 1 unit or lesser than 1 unit. In this case, the difference is just 0.2 something. Okay, but when you balloon it, when you make a big payment, the difference become very obvious. And the bigger your payment, the bigger is the difference. Okay, so foreign exchange does have an implication when we are making payments overseas or receiving payments from overseas. Now I put this in the tutorial to compare the difference between two rates. One Sing to 80.1 yen, 10,000 yen, how much? Let's take a look. 124.8 Sing dollar. Okay, and then we compare with the Thai baht. 1 Sing dollar to 22.24 Thai baht. When you go to pay 4,000 baht, is 179.9 Sing dollar. Okay, so the Thai baht is the more expensive one. Okay, between 4,000 baht and 10,000 yen. Okay, um, this has been the case since a few years ago. When we first derived this question, the difference between 10,000 yen and 4,000 baht in terms of Sing dollar, initially, right, initially the yen was more expensive compared to the Thai baht. All right, look at the rate here. Okay, 1 Sing dollar to 80.1 yen. This is the yen rate that has been this way around this level for quite a long while now. Many years ago, I think it was more than 10 years ago, the yen rate was 1 Sing to 66 yen or so. So when we used that rate then at that level, it was the 10,000 yen that was more expensive. Okay. Nowadays, because the yen rate is now at hovering at around 80 yen, so the Thai baht would seem more expensive. Okay. By the end of today's lesson, you will be able to tell rates. Okay, which one, when the numbers change, uh, which side is appreciating, which side is depreciating. Okay. Now, why do we need exchange rate? Most countries use our own currency, obviously, right? So when, for example, when we travel to the US, we need to have US dollar because they don't use Sing dollar there, right? So when we buy US products, okay, when we are in the US, we want to buy US things, they of course don't accept Sing dollar. All right. Now, technically speaking, when we buy US products in Singapore, we have to pay the US seller. Of course, it has to come from the US, right? So when we pay the US seller, the American seller, we have to pay them in US dollar because they use US dollars over there. Now, why is it that when you go to a supermarket, you buy US stuff now, you buy US grapes or US products? Why is it that you pay in Sing dollar? Because the importer has paid for you first. All right. The supermarket has paid the US sellers for you, and then they sell to us in Sing dollar. All right, but technically or theoretically, when we talk about foreign exchange rate, we are supposed to pay the US seller in their own currency, just as when we sell things to other countries, they are supposed to pay us in Sing dollar, but they pay in their home currency back in their home. That's because their importer has paid us in Sing dollar and got the goods there to sell. Of course, they will then charge in whatever local currency, wherever they are. Okay, so just take note, somebody is doing the foreign exchange, not you. Okay, because you are the final consumer. Okay, the importer on both sides are usually doing the exchange. So companies are usually the one that's making a lot of foreign exchange payments. Okay, so consumer, we don't feel it so strongly because we just simply pay in local currency. All right. Now, how are exchange rates values decided, right? We saw some values, Sing dollar worth how much in foreign currency. Who decide, how is it being decided? Okay, let's take a look. Now, the first kind of exchange rate system is called a fixed exchange rate system. All right, the rate is fixed and it does not change. Okay, now one of the example is between Singapore dollar and the Bruneian currency. Okay, this is a customary kind of exchange because Brunei is a small country. Their financial system is riding on Singapore system. Okay, so their currency is um, fixed as a one to the Sing dollar. All right. You don't see Bruneian currency in Singapore so often nowadays. But when I was much younger as a child, it was very common that we carry Bruneian currency with us. It was everybody accepted that. So we had Sing dollar as well as Bruneian currency with us, and it was treated as equivalent. Everywhere was accepting that. Okay, but nowadays you don't see that happening. Okay. Now, this is not exactly a fixed system. This is what we call a peg, PEG, right? Like a clothing peg. All right. The US dollar is largely pegged with the Hong Kong dollar. All right. Of course, it's the Hong Kong central bank that's doing this. Hong Kong keeps their currency value very tightly linked with the US dollar. The first digit, 7.7, all right, is tied to the US dollar. Now, is this a fixed system? The last two decimal, and sometimes when we have foreign exchange, there's more than one decimal, or obviously, usually there's more than one decimal. So for the Hong Kong side, they actually fix the first two numerical numbers to the US dollar. All right, so the digits following the first are allowed to change. It can be 7.71, 7.73, 7.75, it can still change within that. Okay. Economies sometimes are not in agreement. What do we call this? Is this fixed or is this a very tightly regulated system? Okay. I have put it as fixed because I think it is largely fixed to a very tight band, but it doesn't really matter. Okay, like, it doesn't affect our analysis of exchange rate. It's just a name. How do we call this kind of arrangement? Okay, so most economists call it a peg, PG, a peg. So I would classify it closer to a fixed exchange rate system than uh, the next one that we will talk about. All right, but it's not really very critical what kind of names we call it. Now, in direct contrast to the fixed exchange rate is what we have a flexible or floating exchange rate. Okay, we call it a free float. Um, the value is completely decided by demand and supply of the currency. Okay, by market forces, demand and supply. No government intervention at all. You may be surprised to know that the only currency that operates like that is a US dollar. Now, that's because the US dollar circulation is so large that the US government, their central bank specifically, is no longer able to control it. Okay? Most governments, most central bank retain some kind of control over their own currency. All right? So, which means that most countries are using the third foreign exchange system, which is the managed float. Some textbook call it dirty float. All right, that means half free, half control. All right, most countries are using this. Most countries will retain some kind of control of their currency. All right, so it largely depends on market forces, but the government will intervene if currency appreciates or depreciates beyond a pre-decided band. That means the government has some kind of self-imposed limitation. All right, it cannot go too high or too low. All right, according to their own pre-decided kind of value. Most countries use this system. All right, including Singapore. Now, where does foreign exchange take place? That means where do you go and get foreign currency? Now, different groups of people usually obtain foreign currency in different ways. Okay, for us, we are small-time travelers. We may go and get foreign currency from foreign exchange shops. Okay, some companies that have to pay or receive bigger amounts may do it with banks. Some even bigger companies will trade their own in financial markets, all right, for the really big companies. Now, collectively, all these places are known as the foreign exchange market. This is the collective term where all the buying and selling of the currency takes place. So where do you go and obtain foreign currency? Foreign exchange market. Okay, we use this as a collective term to describe all buying and selling of the currency, all right, in the entire economy and even in the entire world. Now, how are foreign exchange rates determined? Who decides one Sing dollar is worth 0.74 US dollar? Why can't it be zero point 0.8? Why can't it be 1 point something? Let's take a look at how these numbers, how these values are determined. Now let's take a look at a couple of assumptions first before we start looking at how rates changes. Now we will look at the model assuming that it is a free float. That means everything is based on demand and supply. You may be asking, we just say that this is not the most common system. Why are we using that? Now, we are not assuming that that is a common system. We are just looking at the mechanism, how rates will change. Now, once you understand that, you will know what the other rates systems work. Okay, so we are just looking at the mechanism. We will have a currency pair as an example, Sing dollar in terms of Australian. Now, whenever we give a currency pair in a language like that, something in terms of something, we are analyzing the first one. Whatever that we are analyzing is on the first currency. The second one, in terms of, the second one is just a comparison. Focus on the first one. So our analysis, our conclusion, whatever that we are thinking and saying must be on the first currency. Okay, so let's start. How is exchange rate between Sing dollar and Australian dollar determined? Now you must remember, when we look at demand and supply of a currency, we are not looking at the domestic. We are looking at exchange rate as a form of exchange. Okay, so this is the foreign exchange market for the Sing dollar. Now in the foreign exchange market for the Sing dollar, there are people who want the currency and there are people who have the currency. Now, who are the group of people that wants Sing dollar? These people are those who doesn't have Sing dollar. Okay, so when we're looking at these two countries, Sing versus Australia, okay, it is the foreign side to Sing. That means the Australian side who need Sing dollar because they don't have. In Australia, they are using Australian dollar, right? So they don't have Sing dollar. They need Sing dollar. Now, for no reason, they need Sing dollar for what? Australians would need Sing dollar because they want to buy Singapore exports, including coming here for a holiday. Or they want to invest in Singapore, and we only accept Sing dollar. Okay? So these are the two motivations why they need Sing dollar. Okay? Now, what will they do to get Sing dollar? They will sell the Australian dollar. We don't care, right? We are looking at Sing dollar. They will sell their own currency and buy the Sing dollar for these two reasons. Okay? So in the foreign exchange market, where people come and change money, all right, it is the foreigners who will create the demand for the currency. Okay, so in a foreign exchange market where everyone change money, this is not domestic, please. This is a market where we change money. All right, if you are not buying any foreign things, you probably don't need to go to foreign exchange market. All right, but in the foreign exchange market, this is the place where people want to change money only. Okay, this is not domestic. Only where people want to change money, then they go to foreign exchange market. Okay, now, so the demand is always coming from the foreign side. Okay, because they don't have Sing dollar. So we're looking at Australians, they don't have Sing dollar. All right, so they create the demand. Now, the demand is the same as our law of demand, okay, that we have been talking about since BE, okay, in the beginning of the CAT year. High price, they are not so interested to buy, low quantity demanded. Low price, high quantity demanded. So the demand is still a downward sloping curve as in demand for anything. Okay, so if Sing dollar is very expensive, foreigners, in this case Australians, are not so eager to buy. All right. So if you are Australian and you know that Sing dollar is very expensive, you probably say, maybe I'm not going to Singapore for a holiday. Lah. Okay, it's so expensive. Okay. If the Sing dollar is very low, all right, very cheap, Australians would probably want to come more often or to Singapore for holiday and they want more Sing dollar. All right. So the demand is downward sloping curve. Now, in the foreign exchange market where everyone changes money, okay, change money only. I have to remind people this, we are talking about the foreign exchange market because people keep mistaking the foreign exchange market for local money supply, which is totally two different things. You only go to the foreign exchange market when you need to change money. Okay? The one that you're using normally to buy things, we are not looking at that. We are only looking at what goes on in a money changer. Okay? Now, in the money changer activity, who are the one that's selling Sing dollar? It must be us, the Singapore people who's holding Sing dollar, right? We don't have other currencies to sell. We only have Sing dollar, all right? Now, usually what we do is that we bring our Sing dollar to the foreign exchange market, okay, the money changer, all right, to sell our Sing dollar for a foreign currency. In this case, we are buying Australian dollars. Okay, but we don't care. We're looking at Sing dollar, right? So Singaporeans, I'm using the term loosely. Anybody holding on to Sing dollar will be the one that's controlling the supply of the currency. Okay, why do we control the supply of Sing dollar? Because we have Sing dollar. Open your wallets and see. Okay, you have Sing dollars. All right. So when we need to change money, our role is we are supplying Sing dollar into the foreign exchange market. So we follow the law of supply. Same thing. When the price is low, we are not so willing to sell. When the price is high, we are more willing to sell. Okay, now for no reason, we can sell the Sing dollar for what? Same kind of reason, because we want to buy Australian export, including going over there for a holiday. Okay, or we want to invest in Australia. So imagine this. We want to go over to Australia for a holiday. And we don't have Australian currency, right? This is always a question before a holiday, right? We don't have the foreign currency where we are going. So what do? We go to the money exchange, okay, the money changer. And what do we do there? We put our Sing dollar on the table. And then we tell them we want to change into Australian. Okay, so when we're looking at this activity in the foreign exchange market, we are actually selling the Sing dollar, right? We're selling the Sing, we're buying Australian. Our analysis for this is on the Sing dollar. Okay, so in terms of Sing dollar, all right, what are we doing? We're actually selling away the Sing dollar for Australian. All right, so the impact that we play is the selling when we're talking about the Sing dollar. Okay, so just take note. All right, the home side is always selling the currency. So in the foreign exchange market, let's say for American dollars, who are the ones that's selling American dollars? It's Americans themselves. Why? Because they have the currency. They sell the American currency for something else. Malaysians are selling the ringgit for something else. All right. Indonesians are selling the rupiah for something else. Japanese are selling the yen for something else. So the home side is always the one that's in charge of the selling. Foreigners are always in charge of the buying, which is why they control the demand. Okay, once you can get this reason out, foreign exchange is actually quite straightforward to you. Okay. Now, together, the demand and supply will come together and give us a certain value. Okay, when we look at the foreign exchange market, all the money changer activities, all right, the Sing people selling the Sing dollar and the foreign people, in this case Australian, buying the Sing, all the buying and selling will yield a price for the Sing dollar. The price of Sing dollar is what we call the exchange rate. Okay, the price of Sing in terms of Australian. Okay, so this will give us a value. Let's try some other examples, okay? If the question comes out, US dollar in terms of the euro, we are looking at the US dollar. All right, we are analyzing the US dollar. So this Forex market is on the US dollar. Home side are the Americans. They hold the US dollar. So Americans will sell the US dollars to buy euro. This is a foreign comparison, yeah? They will sell their US dollars to buy euro. Now, why do they do that? For no good reason. Because they want to buy European exports and invest in Europe. Okay, Europe don't accept US dollars. Okay, they use euro. All right. So the US people, the Americans, control the supply of the US dollar. Okay, Europeans don't have the US dollar and they need the US dollar. So what they do is they will sell their own currency and buy the US dollar because they want to buy American exports, including going to US for a holiday, or they want to invest in US, which only, of course, accept US dollar. All right, so Europeans control the demand. Okay, so as long as when I give you a currency pair, you know which side is in charge of the selling, which side in charge of buying, you should be quite clear with foreign exchange. Now, take note, foreign exchange is the result of the demand and supply of the respective currencies into the foreign exchange market. Into the foreign exchange market. Okay, it has nothing to do with your domestic money demand, money supply. Okay, Sing dollar versus Australian dollar has a value because we go and change money. If we don't need to change money, we're just doing our own thing. All right, there's no foreign exchange rate. Okay, so foreign exchange rate is the result of the demand and supply of the respective currencies into the foreign exchange market. All right, we're looking at the money changer activity only, not your regular money demand, money supply inside the economy. Okay, so you must get it clear. Now, so far we have understood how foreign exchange rates are determined. Okay, now you know that foreign exchange rates are changing all the time. What causes it to change? Two things: demand side factors and supply side factors. Let's take a look at it. Okay, we are still keeping to the Sing dollar in terms of Australian example. Okay, now we know that exchange rate is decided by demand versus supply. Demand coming from the foreign side, supply coming from the home side. This will give us a value of the currency. Now, let's assume that there's now changes on the demand side. Now, what do we mean? If the motivation to buy Sing dollar changes, either it intensifies or it weakens, this will change the demand of Sing dollar. Okay, for example, Australians might want to buy more Singapore exports, or Australia might want to invest less in Singapore. When these motivations change, this will change the demand for Sing dollar coming from the foreign side. So what will cause these motivations to change? Now, for example, Australians need more Sing dollar if they want to buy more Singapore exports or invest more in Singapore. What will cause that to happen? One reason is their GDP rises. That means Australian side becomes richer. Now, when you are richer, don't you want more things? Okay, so if Australian side is getting richer, okay, they are more wealthy, GDP going up, okay, they would want to buy more Singapore exports. Yeah, motivation number one will become more intensive. Okay, so it will intensify motivation number one. Okay, if the GDP of Australia becomes higher. So in the foreign exchange market, this is the original exchange rate. When Australians demand increase because motivation number one is intensifying, Australian will demand more Sing dollar because more of them who are now richer wants to come to Singapore for a holiday, or they want to come more often for a holiday. So they need more Sing dollar. Okay, so they will buy more Sing dollar, and as a result, Sing dollar appreciates because demand curve shifts to the right. Okay, and this demand is coming from the Australian side. Okay, now Motivation 2 can also becomes intensified. Now, what will affect investment? Interest rate. Okay, now here we are looking at interest rate as a deposit rate. How much the banks are giving you when you put money in the bank. All right. Now, so if Singapore side gives attractive interest rate higher than Australia, Australians will want to move more of their cash into Singapore. Okay, so motivation number 2 will become intensified. All right, because they want to move their money to Singapore, so they need more Sing dollar. So they will sell more of the Australian and buy more Sing dollar. Okay, so in the foreign exchange market, same thing happens. All right, motivation number 2, which is caused by Singapore interest rates becoming higher, will intensify the desire to invest in Singapore. So to bring their cash to Singapore, they need to convert their Australian dollar to Singapore, right? So they will sell their Australian to buy more Sing dollar. The demand for Sing dollar goes up, so Sing dollar appreciates. Okay, so these are examples of changes on the demand side. All right, now, so you can visually think about what will cause Australia, the Australian side, to buy less Singapore dollar. Okay, you can think about that. Okay, so we are just showing you the circumstances of Australian side, the foreign side, buying more Sing dollar. So the reverse would be buying less. Go and think about that. Okay. Now let's take a look at changes on the supply side. Okay, remember supply side is home people. So we're looking at the home currency, the Singapore people. Let's see what happens. So you have exchange rate as per norm. Now, so Singapore, let's say, motivation number 1 intensifies. Okay, so Singaporeans want to buy more Australian exports. Now, why do we, for no reason, want to buy more Australian exports? Because we become richer. Okay, so now we assume that Singapore side becomes richer. Okay, so we want to buy more Australian exports, or like go over to Australia for holiday, or go more often for holiday. Okay, so when we become richer, our motivation number 1 intensify, and therefore we need more Australian dollar. To get the Australian dollar, we need to sell more Sing. Okay, we need to sell more Sing. So in the foreign exchange market, to buy more Australian dollar, we need to sell more Sing. We're looking at Sing dollar, so Singapore people are selling more Sing. All right, the motivation that is intensifying is number 1, because we are richer, remember? Okay, we are richer, want to buy more Australian export. So we will sell more of our Sing dollar to get more Australian. Okay, so this action of selling more Sing will cause the supply curve to shift to the right. All right, so Sing dollar depreciates. Okay, now you may be wondering, how come we are richer and then our currency value depreciates? Now just take note, foreign exchange rate may not move in tandem with GDP. This is a very layman kind of thinking. Oh, when you are richer, your country doing well, your currency is supposed to go up. It may not work that way. Okay, so take that notion off. Okay, take that notion off. All right, so when you are richer, in this case, what we are looking at is you buy more foreign things because you are getting richer. You sell more of your currency. Supply into the foreign exchange market increases because you want to sell your currency to pay for the foreign products that you're buying. You need foreign currency, right? So you're selling your home currency in larger quantities. So supply curve shift to the right, and therefore your currency depreciates. So more people sell that thing, obviously the price or value of that thing will fall. Okay, so Sing dollar depreciates. Okay. Now, we may also want to invest more in Australia. Okay, now motivation number 2 is always controlled by interest rate. All right, now people will move their money to whichever side that offers a higher interest rate. So in this case, if the Australian side is having a higher interest rate, Singapore people will want to move their money to the Australian side. To do that, they got to sell away the Sing, get the Australian to do that. Okay, so if motivation number two becomes intensified because Australia side is paying a higher interest rate, then in the foreign exchange market, we will sell more of the Sing dollar because we want to invest more in Australia because motivation number two is intensifying because of interest rate in Australia being higher than us. Okay, so we will sell more of the Sing. We are taking the Australian, going over to Australia to invest. Okay, so in the analysis of Sing dollar, we are selling more of the Sing. Okay, so this more of the selling activity will result in the value of the Sing dollar depreciating. Okay, now before we look at the impact of appreciation, that means the value of a currency becoming higher, or depreciation, which means the value of currency becoming lower, let's see whether you can tell a currency pair when I give you two rates. Can you tell which currency has appreciated or depreciated? Okay, now let's have a Sing dollar in terms of the Thai baht. Okay, so one Sing dollar in terms of Thai baht. Now let's look at the value of 2 years, January 2017 and October 2018. Okay, and these are the values. Now, over the course of the 1.5 years, from Jan 2017 to October 2018, if you look at a value like that, which currency has gone up in value and which currency has gone down in value? Which one appreciated, which one depreciated when I give you a value like this? Now, you should be able to tell. Okay, now look at it from the Sing side. Those of you who can tell immediately, good for you. Okay, now those of you who can't tell, right? Imagine you are the home person holding on to one Sing dollar. Can you exchange for more or less Thai baht? Okay, at the end of the period. In 2017, Sing holders of Sing dollar, one Sing dollar, you managed to change almost 25 Thai baht, right? But in 2018, your one Sing dollar can only fetch 23.82 baht. So your one Sing dollar fetch less Thai baht. So your Sing dollar actually depreciated. The value of Sing dollar has gone down because it can be exchanged for less Thai baht. Okay, now on the other side, if you look at the perspective from the Thai perspective, in 2017 to buy your one Sing, they paid 25 baht or so to buy your one Sing. But in 2018, they only need to pay 23.82 baht. So they need less Thai baht to buy your one Sing. So the Thai baht has appreciated. The Sing dollar has depreciated. Okay, so when I give you a rate, you must understand it from the perspective of an exchange. You cannot look at the value and then say, look at the value and then assume that something has gone up or down in value by looking at the number. Okay, you must look at it from an exchange perspective. Can you get more or less of the other currency? Or if you're looking at it from a home side, can your currency buy more or less of the other foreign currency? Okay, so if you're looking for the home side, Sing people, all right, can only get less Thai baht. So Sing dollar has depreciated. On the foreign side, they need less Thai baht to buy our one Sing. So their currency has appreciated. All right, so when we have two currency, two rates, one must go up, one must come down. Okay, like a seesaw. There's never, when we have a currency pair, there's never two currency appreciate or two currency depreciate. One go up, the other one must come down. Okay, so it's a win-lose kind of situation. Okay, one appreciate, one depreciate. Okay, now we look at next currency pair. I'm keeping it simple, Sing in terms of Australian. Okay, '07 Sing dollar exchange for 81 Australian cents. In 2018, one Sing dollar exchange for 1.02 Australian dollar. Okay, now you can tell if you are holder of the Sing $1, can you see that your $1 actually fetch a higher Australian dollar in 2018? Okay, in 2018 you can get 1.02 Australian. In 2007 you only got 81 Australian cent. So your Sing dollar can exchange for more Australian. So your Sing dollar has appreciated. If you are looking at from the Australian perspective, '07 you only need 81 cents to buy the one Sing dollar. In 2018, 11 years later, you needed 1.02 Australian dollar to buy the same one Sing dollar. So you need more of your own currency to buy the other currency. So Australian dollar has depreciated. Now, whichever side you look at, the conclusion is the same. Sing dollar has appreciated, Australian dollar has depreciated. When you look at the perspective from Sing dollar has appreciated, Australian dollar automatically must have depreciated. Remember, it's a seesaw, it's a one win, one lose. Okay, from the Australian side, if you can tell that Australian dollar has depreciated, then Sing dollar must have appreciated. Okay, one go higher, one go lower. It's always this way. Okay, take some time to figure this out. Now, what is the impact of the currency appreciating or depreciating to the economy? We look at appreciation first, okay? Now, the layman understanding is, oh, when your currency appreciate, oh, good, good. It may not be that way, okay? Everything has got a flip side to it. So when your currency becomes more expensive, that means your one Sing can fetch more foreign currency. Or from the foreign perspective, they need more of their currency to buy your one Sing. What is the impact to the economy of Singapore? Foreigners may find that Singapore exports are more expensive because they're going to pay us in Sing dollar, right? So when they need to buy Singapore things or come here for holiday, they find it so expensive on your Sing dollar. Okay, so our Sing dollar prices to them is very expensive. Even though we may not change the price, but because we're going to change currency, when Sing dollar becomes more expensive to the foreigner, it's more expensive for them. They may not buy your exports. Okay, so that is a big problem. But if we depend a lot on foreign goods, when our currency go up, we can buy foreign goods more cheaply. Now, foreigners did not change their price. Why does it seem cheaper? Is because the exchange rate has changed. So when Sing dollar goes up, it appreciates in value. When we buy foreign goods, it becomes cheaper for us. Okay, but foreigners will find it more expensive to buy our goods. Okay, so you figure out whether is this good or not. Okay, so just remember everything got a flip side to it. All right, you know that export is an X, import is a minus M. So when imports becomes cheaper, we may have a tendency to buy more, right? So is this good for the economy? You think about that. Okay. Now, similarly, when a currency depreciates, is it totally bad? It may not be. Okay, Singapore people may find foreign exports more expensive. We may find foreign goods more expensive, then we buy less. Now, buying less means your imports amount will fall. So minus M is falling. It may not be so bad, right? And foreigners will find Singapore exports cheaper and buy more from us. X goes up, not bad, right? So currency depreciation might not be a totally bad thing. Okay, the problem is when you have no choice but you need foreign goods, then you're going to pay more of your own currency. Okay, so it depends on the situation. All right, so the layman understanding is depreciation is no good, appreciation is good. It may not be that way. Okay, it may not be that way. All right, if you are an economy that makes your livelihood by selling goods to overseas and your currency becomes more and more expensive, and if your foreign buyers have an alternative, then they may no longer want to buy from you. All right, then that could be a problem. All right. Take note, the central bank can enter the foreign exchange market to influence the foreign exchange rate by using reserves. Okay, especially when it needs to increase the exchange rate value. Okay, that means other than the demand and supply, which is controlled by the foreigners and locals, the central bank can go in, all right, and try to influence the rates. So to make the rate higher, the central bank can put themselves like a foreign buyer. Okay, so for example, if our central bank wants to increase the value of Sing dollar, one way is they will sell whatever Australian dollar that they have and buy up the Sing dollar as if they are a foreigner. But that also means that the central bank must have some Australian dollar savings in the first place. Okay, so when you look at the reserves, all right, usually it's called international reserves. All right, because all the countries would usually not save in just their own currency. They will save in a variety of currency. Okay, most of the time is because of strategic reasons like this. If you need it for your foreign exchange market. Okay, so if let's say Singapore Central Bank, the Monetary Authority of Singapore, wants to increase the Singapore dollar value, it will act like a foreign buyer. Okay, and you use its Australian dollar savings and buy up the Sing dollar. Okay, so central bank buys Sing dollar by pretending to be a foreign buyer. Okay, to decrease the exchange rate, to make it cheaper, this one is easy. Like you don't have to use reserve. You just need to sell the currency. Okay, so you sell the Sing dollar. This is easier because the central bank controls uh, the home currency. So it has lots of home currency, so you can just keep selling. All right, so this is easier. So you just sell more. So supply curve shift to the right. The value of Sing dollar will depreciate. Okay. Why does the central bank do that? We will leave it for the tutorial. Okay. So this is the end of our topic. This is something new, so please go and revise on it. Make sure you try our tutorial questions, and any questions, please ask your tutor during the tutorial sessions. Okay? See you again.